My name is Tanya Vela, and I am the Southeast Accessible Ohio Specialist. Today's presentation is all about sensory inclusion.
And my name is Cynthia L. and I'm the Business Relations Specialist in the Southwest region of Ohio. We plan for accessibility from the start. For example, we use the accessibility checker that's built into Microsoft 365 to review the resource guide and our PowerPoint. We address color contrast, font style and size, and add alternative text, known as alt text, to our visual images. Also, in our delivery, you'll notice that we mention each other by name as the conversation goes back and forth to indicate who is speaking. This can be helpful when attendees are receiving this information through services like American Sign Language interpretation and live captioning. After the webinar, we edit the transcript and fix any captioning errors before uploading the webinar to our on-demand library. We also include a reasonable accommodation statement in our invitation to the webinar. So if attendees need an accommodation, they know who to contact to ask. Taking these steps up front can make this presentation more accessible and inclusive for everyone. Tanya, will you share with us an overview of today's webinar?
Yes. The purpose of today's webinar is about understanding sensory inclusion and exploring strategies and tools available to make your workplace and community spaces more accommodating for everyone. First, we'll define what we mean by sensory inclusion. Then we'll discuss ways to accommodate sensory needs in various environments, like the workplace and community spaces. Finally, we'll identify proactive ways to create sensory inclusion in your work and community environments using universal design concepts. So let's start with defining sensory inclusion, understanding our senses, and discussing why this is so important. Sensory inclusion means considering sensory needs when creating spaces, environments, and experiences to ensure everyone can perform work, participate in activities, and feel welcomed. Cynthia, can you explain our senses and how they relate to sensory input?
Why, thanks, Tanya. I will. Everyone processes sensory information from physical surroundings differently. Processing involves our brains receiving, organizing, and responding to this information. So let's start by thinking of the ways we receive information. One way is through the sense of sight. We use sight to gain information about our surroundings, like shapes, colors, and more. We also use our hearing to learn about our environment, like how the sound of an announcement notifies us there's a performance starting. Next will be the sense of touch. We identify things like temperature, pressure, and objects through touch. Another way we receive information is through taste. We discern flavors such as sweet, salty, sour, and bitter. We use the sense of smell to inform us about specific odors. For example, the smell of smoke in a kitchen alerts us that something's burning. Lastly, we use movement and signals from our bodies when we push, pull, squeeze, and twist objects to understand our position in space. Every person, situation, and environment is unique, which leads to different sensory experiences. So one person may need more sensory input, another person needs less. One person might prefer working at a desk surrounded by natural lighting, while another prefers to work on a couch in a dimly lit space. We all manage our sensory needs daily. Tanya, let's go ahead and ask our audience a question about the different ways a person manages sensory needs and gain their input.
It's a great idea. A poll will appear on your screen. And here's the question. How might someone manage their sensory needs? Please participate by selecting one of the poll options. A, chewing gum. B, listening to background noise or music. C, clicking a pen top. Or D, all of the above. Give you a few more seconds to answer. Cynthia, what does our audience say?
Well, at a rousing 97% thus far, it looks like the answer is all of the above. And that actually would be the correct answer. So these are all good ways a person may manage their sensory needs. You may use some of these techniques or something else like shaking your foot while seated, twirling your hair while listening or concentrating, swiveling a chair or rocking back and forth in a chair. or needing to move frequently instead of staying in one position. As we mentioned earlier, every person, situation, and environment are unique. As a result, we may experience the same environment differently, which has an impact on daily life. Let's consider this. When it comes to sensory need management, some individuals need to manage sensory input such as sights, sounds, and smells to participate in activities and experiences. While some individuals may seek out sensory input, others may avoid it. A few examples of what an individual with sensory needs may experience include light sensitivity, seeking input such as movement, making it difficult to sit still, avoiding sounds, or difficulty maintaining attention for prolonged periods. To manage these needs, individuals may use tinted glasses, fidgets, noise-canceling headphones, or visit a sensory space. Being aware of these needs and how individuals manage them can help you foster inclusive interactions. Tanya, can you talk to us about why sensory inclusion is important?
I'd be happy to. Fostering sensory inclusive practices in the workplace enables individuals the flexibility to perform work in a way that works best for them. This can lead to increased creativity, problem solving, and innovation, which are all great benefits for any workplace. Prioritizing accessibility and inclusion in communities creates environments where everyone can participate and enjoy their experiences. By doing this, it sends the message that you value everyone. Individuals with sensory needs may benefit from sensory inclusive practices. This includes those with sensory processing disabilities or other conditions where sensory symptoms are impacted. Some examples are individuals with autism, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, anxiety disorder, traumatic brain injury, and learning disorders. These practices can also benefit individuals without disabilities. We all process sensory input in our own way and have personal preferences for different types of sensory input. Making things accessible and inclusive often benefits everyone. Think of services we all use, like automatic doors at grocery stores and voice recognition technology for sending text messages or emails. The same goes for applying sensory inclusive practices, which can benefit everyone. So here's some ideas. A venue using a chime instead of a loud buzzer, or a workplace offering a sensory room or quiet space for employees to use during breaks. This room could be useful for doing breathing exercises to manage anxiety, listening to calm sounds to manage sensory needs, or having a private place to manage personal needs such as medication management. Before we talk about ways to accommodate sensory needs in the workplace and in community spaces, let's ask our audience for the participation again. On your screen, a poll will appear. Cynthia will read the questions, and we're interested in knowing your answers.
All right, let's talk about sensory inclusion. So, which of these have you experienced at work? Something annoying that made it hard to focus? Wishing the office lighting was just right, either dimmer or brighter. Being distracted by smells like lunch or cologne. Wanting the office temperature to be more comfortable, cooler, or warmer. Or all of the above.
Okay, our answers are rolling in. Thank you for your answers. It looks like the majority of our audience have experienced all of these. Well, we all have different experiences. I personally often dress in layers most days to adapt to the temperature in our offices.
Thanks, Tanya. I think I need an extra layer today in our office as well. We ask those questions to highlight that everyone has sensory needs. When these needs rise to the level of a disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, individuals may request a reasonable accommodation at work. So let's go ahead and discuss Title I of the ADA. Title I prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all aspects of employment and requires covered employees to provide reasonable accommodation to individuals with disabilities when needed. According to the Job Accommodation Network, otherwise known as JAN, and the Employer Assistance and Resource Network on Disability, also known as EARN, here are a few workplace barriers related to sensory needs. The first would be smell sensitivity. This would be for like environments like restaurants or retail shops that sell candles. Offices near spaces where smells frequently occur, such as the break room. Or cleaning products, perfume, and food in lunch areas. Next would be touch sensitivity. This would refer to workplaces requiring employees to wear specific uniforms or uncomfortable office furniture. Followed by sound sensitivity. So sounds of trains, traffic, sirens, and phones ringing, or loud noises and extended exposure to noise, such as conversations in crowded spaces, printers, or air conditioning units. There's also sight sensitivity. So this is bright lights in crowded workspaces or colors and patterns in the workplace environment. Or taste sensitivity, a dislike of food with certain tastes or textures. And finally, movement sensitivity. This is the need for movement, so feeling restless or fidgety. Tanya, will you go ahead and discuss reasonable accommodations with us?
Sure. A reasonable accommodation is a change in the way something is customarily done at work to enable an individual with a disability to access the hiring process and then compete for a job, perform the job's essential functions, and enjoy the privileges of employment. It's important to know that not every person with a disability needs an accommodation. However, when an accommodation is requested, the employer should begin the interactive process quickly. This is the collaborative process described by the ADA, where both parties work together to identify and implement an effective solution. The best place to start is to ask the person what ideas they have. They may have encountered this barrier in the past and know what will work best. There are numerous ways to provide reasonable accommodations in the workplace, and we'll highlight some of these later. The EEOC helps us to understand the many ways reasonable accommodations can be provided by organizing them into these types. First, making the work environment accessible, restructuring a job, permitting a flexible schedule, altering supervisory methods, providing or altering equipment and services, modifying policies, and finally, providing reassignment. Earlier, we discussed barriers related to sensory needs that employees may experience in the workplace. Let's revisit these barriers and consider some effective accommodations. The first barrier we discussed was smell sensitivity, and an employee whose workstation is near a space with frequent smells. So perhaps relocating the workstation to an area away from the break room to avoid smells of coffee, lunches, and that dreaded burnt popcorn smell. The second barrier we mentioned was that touch sensitivities, which could impact an employee's tolerance to work uniforms or working in extreme weather conditions. An option to consider could be modifying the work uniform policy to address the employee's tactile sensitivities. We also discussed noise sensitivity and how noise outside or inside the work environment can create barriers for individuals with auditory sensitivities. A consideration is to provide noise-canceling headphones or sound absorption panels for workspaces. And lastly, we mentioned crowded spaces. This can present challenges to sensory systems, including touch, auditory, visual systems, and more. So consider permitting a flexible schedule, such as permitting an employee to work during hours when fewer people are present. Now, these accommodations are all great, but you may be wondering, what is the cost incurred? Cynthia, do you have any ideas about this?
Well, as a matter of fact, I do, Tanya. When an accommodation is needed, a survey from the Job Accommodation Network revealed more than half of accommodations are free. And those with a one-time cost typically average around $300. According to Jan, a wealth of talent awaits employers who open doors to candidates with disabilities, and effective job accommodations are key to hiring and retaining them. The accommodation they may need, if any, are often easy to implement, and cost less than employers think. Tanya, can you talk to us about Title II and Title III of the ADA?
Absolutely. Title II of the ADA prohibits discrimination based on disability in programs, services, and activities offered to the public by state and local governments. So this includes public education, public transportation, and libraries, to mention a few. Now, Title III of the ADA prohibits discrimination based on disability in commercial facilities and places of public accommodation. This covers businesses and nonprofit organizations, such as restaurants, movie theaters, and recreational facilities. Entities covered under Title II and III of the ADA must provide reasonable modifications to policy, practices, and procedures, and provide effective communication. The Northeast ADA Center defines a reasonable modification as a change in policy, practice, or procedure that is done to offer equal access and equal opportunity for a person with a disability. It's a best practice for organizations to include a statement on how to request a reasonable modification in key areas, such as their accessibility webpage or invitations to events. An accessibility webpage organizes the accessibility features and services a venue offers into one location. This webpage may include information about accessibility services, design elements, and available features such as accessible parking locations, accessible entrances, accessible restrooms, sensory tools, power mobility device charging stations, and more. When you registered for today's webinar, you may have noticed OOD's statement to make a request. We provide a contact person, phone number, and email address. Reasonable modifications might include offering a guest with auditory sensitivities to reserve a seat away from audio speakers or provide noise-canceling headsets. Perhaps modifying a no outside items policy to enable a guest to bring their own sensory tools, such as fidgets or headphones. Using light filters to reduce brightness in designated areas for guests with light sensitivity. Cynthia?
Thanks, Tanya. With that, let's go ahead and take a break and answer some audience questions. Please go ahead and use that Q&A button at the top of your screen to ask the presenters questions. And now, Julie Wood, the Accessible Ohio Manager, will be joining us for the question and answer portions of the webinar.
Thank you, Cynthia, and good morning, everyone. The first question that we have is asking about making tabletop board gaming venues sensory accessible. So there are ways that these types of venues can be more accessible to the sensory needs that we all have. And so you would want to just consider each of the senses that we've shared today in the webinar, but I'm going to give some examples of things you could think about for your environment. So when we think about lighting in general for everybody, a best practice is to make sure that that's adjustable for the needs that the group playing the game has. Now, at times, there might be differences in what everybody needs with that adjustable lighting. So you also want to think about what can we interject or add to the environment. So maybe you have task lighting. So if you're dimming the overhead lights, but somebody wants a brighter light, you have a task light available. And if the overhead lights are brighter and somebody prefers it dimmer, you could have something like tinted lenses, like sunglasses, available. Similarly, when you think of sound, you could implement some things in the environment like soundproof walls or partitions or room dividers. But also, what can you add to the space for unique or individual needs? So that might be noise canceling devices like headphones or earbuds or small noise canceling machines. Similarly with temperature, provide adjustability to that, but what can we add to the environment? So to cool it down, we could have a fan available, or to provide warmth, we could have a blanket. Another idea when we think about sound is if you're having a game where you're rolling dice, maybe roll the dice onto a mat instead of a hard tabletop surface to decrease some of that noise. And then just provide a variety of options for sitting, for standing, provide some fidget toys. And these are ways that we can ensure that we are providing sensory accessibility for these types of venues. Our next question was asking about sensory inclusion regarding clients who are deafblind or who have hearing or visual disabilities. And so some ideas of what you can integrate into the environment is sign language interpretation and captioning for events and meetings and trainings. Also think about, after a session like that, providing a transcription. Usually when we're navigating community spaces, we have signage in the environment. So think about ways to provide that in a visual and a tactile format. And then with all the ways that we communicate, think of the alternate formats that we can use, such as audio and visual. Just some ideas for that. We also have another webinar in our on-demand library that speaks specifically to these sensory disabilities. It's a part of the employer's reasonable accommodation handbook. So that is available on our webpage. And let me check to see what else is coming in for questions. We have quite a few. Let's see if we can address a couple, and we might get to some of these at the next Q&A break. If the goal for in-office is to collaborate with our team, but being in the office causes a sensory overload due to the chatter noise, what would you recommend to help other than listening to music with earbuds? Okay, so we're in the office with our team, lots of noise with all the communications going on. And so some ideas that you can consider when you're in that interactive process discussing accommodations with the employee are noise canceling devices. So you can think about earbuds or small machines that we've talked about. You could look at relocating the workstation. So is there an area away from a lot of the conversation that is occurring that could be helpful? You could look at the soundproofing of the cubicles or the partitions that are in the space as well. So those might be some additional considerations to think about when you're going through the process. Let's look at the next question. How would it be possible to modify office space lighting when sharing a space with multiple coworkers who also have specific wants and needs? So similar to what we shared with the gaming venue, there are things that you can change about the environment to make it adjustable, but then that might change what everybody needs. So just using the office environment where we have the overhead lighting for everybody. Some options that have been implemented that you could consider: could you turn off a bank of lighting in certain areas and then offer task lighting to offset that being turned off? Could you look at changing the type of light bulb so that it's more like natural light, and would that make it an environment that works for everybody? You can put a screen or an overlay over a bank of lights that can also serve to change it to natural lighting. Relocate workstations, provide task lighting. If you're seated next to a window with natural light, think about putting a shade or a curtain that can be utilized because the daylight's different, right? It could be a cloudy day, could be a sunny day, and then where the sun is positioned throughout the day changes. So those are some things that can be looked at in the environment as you're going through that interactive process and figuring out that case-by-case solution. So we have other questions, but we are going to return to the webinar and we will answer these at the next break. So thank you, and I will see you at the next break.
Thanks, Julie, and thanks to the audience for your questions. Thanks to Julie for making sure the questions were addressed. So we'll be stopping one more time for a question and answer session later in the webinar. Please continue to use that Q&A button for questions that you have. All right, now that we've defined sensory inclusion and ways to accommodate sensory needs in the workplace and community related to the ADA, let's go ahead and discuss sensory inclusion through the lens of universal design. Universal design focuses on creating buildings, products, and environments that are understandable, usable, and accessible to the greatest extent possible by all people, regardless of age, disability, and other factors. The concepts of universal design can help organizations create welcoming spaces where visitors can obtain information, engage in activities of interest, and feel included throughout their experience. Let's go ahead and talk about some examples. So crossing signals at crosswalks include images and sounds, providing visual symbols and audible alerts to indicate when it's safe to cross the street. This can be beneficial for an individual who's on their phone or listening to music, an individual who's blind or has low vision, or an individual who does not speak or read the language. Captioning is another example of universal design. Captioning converts audio into text to make information accessible to all people, including those with disabilities. There are different types of captioning, like open, closed, and live captions. This can be usable for watching a movie in a noisy setting or in a quiet environment when headphones are not available, or for an individual who is deaf or hard of hearing, and individuals who retain information better through reading and listening. Lastly, let's talk about automatic doors. So automatic doors automatically open upon a person's approach, making entry easier. Automatic doors can be usable for a parent pushing a child in a stroller, shoppers with their arms full of bags, and individuals using mobility devices. Okay, now that we've discussed a few examples of universal design, we'd like to share how sensory inclusion relates to universal design. As we mentioned earlier, sensory inclusive practices benefit everyone, including individuals with sensory needs. They contribute to creating accessible and inclusive workplaces and community settings for visitors, guests, and staff. So we will now explore how these topics impact both the workplace and community spaces by discussing sensory spaces and tools, sensory inclusive hours and events, sensory maps, and social narratives. Let's go ahead and start with sensory spaces. These are designated spaces where individuals can take a break from an environment or activity to manage their sensory needs. Sensory spaces can be utilized in both the workplace and the community. And these spaces can be designed to offer either a stimulating or calming sensory experience, so individuals can access what they need. If the space will be used for both experiences, consider how to structure and organize it to accommodate both types of input effectively. Think about soundproof walls, room dividers, and noise-canceling devices like headphones, kind of what Julie referred to in the question a few minutes ago. So flexibility, which is a universal design principle, is key. It's important to provide adjustable lighting, temperature controls, and volume for sounds so anyone can benefit.
Cynthia, sensory tools are a great addition to a sensory space. When creating sensory spaces, consider useful tools for all the senses. These tools can help individuals manage their sensory needs by either increasing or decreasing stimulation. So here are some ideas for each of the senses. With smell, some individuals seek certain scents, while others may avoid them. So careful consideration should be taken when incorporating tools related to smell. Instead of filling the space with aromas, consider providing tools like scented markers for individual use. With touch, the texture of materials can provide different sensations. Soft items like fuzzy blankets are soothing. Rubber squishy balls offer a different tactile experience. So also consider the overall temperature of the space, and tools such as heating and/or cooling pads can help assist with managing it. For hearing, tools to create a calm or upbeat environment would include things such as slow, rhythmic music to create a calm environment, while quick, upbeating music can be alerting. And headphones can be useful to listen to music or sounds in various environments. With sight, use tools to increase or decrease visual stimulation. For example, a device with quick spinning lights can be visually alerting, while a projector displaying a slow spinning image can be visually calming. Some helpful tools for taste include water, crunchy snacks, chewy snacks, mints, or candy lollipops. And then lastly, movement and orientation. With movement, and changes in body position, this can create different sensations. Some examples include wobble cushions, weighted blankets, and rocking chairs. These and other tools support users in managing their sensory needs through movement. Sensory tools enable individuals to increase or decrease their sensory input, helping them manage their sensory needs. These tools can be used in community settings by guests to enjoy an experience, or in the workplace to manage sensory needs during work. When exploring sensory tools to have available, consider the following. First, where will they be used? Sensory tools in a calm, quiet setting can differ from those used in a less structured or noisy setting. And then, are there external factors to be accounted for? Extended exposure to cold and hot temperatures can affect the materials of sensory tools and impact the effectiveness of the sensory input received. Cynthia, what if an organization doesn't have space or an area dedicated to addressing sensory needs?
Great question. Mobile Sensory Station provides venues with the opportunity to offer guests a sensory experience in another way. These stations are most often used in community settings and come in various forms. Some include sensory kits, which are set up for a specific facility, while others are provided in a vehicle, like a van. For example, an organization can bring a sensory vehicle to events and venues in the community to provide a sensory space for guests to experience. Also, some organizations may actually offer to ship a mobile sensory station that can be assembled and utilized at events and venues in the community. Another way organizations empower individuals to manage their sensory needs is by offering sensory inclusive hours and events. These are set times when sensory friendly practices are implemented, including smell, so removing or turning off automatic air fresheners throughout the venue, addressing touch, limiting the amount of people who can attend, or providing multiple start times to help reduce crowds, providing a separate space or an area to take a break, reducing volume or removing sounds and overhead music, providing signage in areas where sounds cannot be removed or reduced to alert the visitors and guests. Also looking at sight, deactivating flashing lights, reducing bright fluorescent lights or covering them with non-flammable cloth or fabric during the event, managing direct and natural light with blinds or other methods, and creating areas of dim lighting. Looking at taste, so offering a variety of food options and a way for individuals to indicate specific dietary needs, if possible. And then movement and orientation, providing opportunities for individuals to move around during an event and including scheduled breaks for movement, or providing a separate space or specific area to take a break. Similar to universal design, this inclusive practice can benefit anyone, including individuals with sensory sensitivities. Tanya, how do community members and caregivers find these sensory inclusive spaces and tools within a venue?
It's a great question. Accessibility maps display the accessibility features of an environment. These maps are made sensory friendly by including details on the level of sensory stimuli in various areas. So showing where sights, sounds, and scents are increased or minimized. Some sensory stimuli to include on the map include quiet spaces, noisy areas, areas with bright or changing lights, sections with natural light, areas with low or subdued lighting, crowded spaces, zones with smells or scents, tactile exhibits, and areas for movement. Adding some sensory information to the map helps visitors plan their visit and navigate about the space more comfortably. Accessibility and sensory maps are often found in community spaces. Cynthia, are there ways to prepare for an event or a venue before going?
Why, yes, there are. A social narrative is a short story that describes events or places in simple and clear language. It's a mini guide with pictures and words designed to increase awareness. They also feature tips and tricks, things to remember, and rules. Social narratives help individuals plan their visit by providing information to decrease the likelihood of challenges or surprises. For example, if a social narrative describes an area of the venue that's bright, an individual who's sensitive to bright lights may choose to bring tinted glasses. These narratives can also help people understand the steps involved in activities, such as waiting in line for an attraction or ordering food at the cafe. Social narratives are another example of sensory inclusion and universal design. Anyone can benefit. They're useful tools for anyone who wants to know what to expect at a venue, including children, teens, adults, families, school groups, people with disabilities, and others. Social narratives are offered in various ways. So some are available on the venue website to view or download and print. Some venues offer a printed version on site, and then others use an app to host their social narrative. A social narrative should sequence the information in chronological order to aid in understanding what to expect. I have some suggestions on what to include. Number one, a brief description of the space. So what a guest may see, experience, feel, or sense. Sounds, including the volume, common sounds from crowds, environmental noises, and overlapping sounds. Lighting, including flashing or moving lights, brightness, dimness, ambient lighting, and brightness of colors. Smells in the environment and smells associated with the venue, activity, and or the exhibit. And physical characteristics of the area, including the size of the area, features like restrooms, drinking fountains, stairs, ramps, and elevators. While social narratives may be more prevalent in the community setting, the concept of visual storytelling can also be used at work as a training or onboarding strategy to support individuals who prefer a visual learning style. Tanya, can you tell me what some general best practice venues should consider when offering sensory spaces and tools?
Sure, Cynthia. It's important to communicate the availability of sensory tools and/or spaces because this can help visitors and employees know what's available. So here's some tips. In the community setting, locate sensory tool information on a dedicated accessibility webpage. Explain where visitors can get the sensory tools and who to contact for assistance. Now, in the workplace, include this information during onboarding, ongoing training, and on company web pages or newsletters. In both settings, it's important to provide information about sensory tools, such as how to use them, use plain language, and include pictures to visually communicate information about using sensory tools. The Accessible Ohio Sensory Tool Checklist, developed by our very own Accessible Ohio program, provides useful information about promoting sensory tools too. We'll provide a link in our chat. One best practice it shares is to offer instructions for use in multiple formats, such as written, audio, braille, and large print. This resource includes tips to provide sensory tools in an inclusive way.
Thanks for sharing all that with us, Tanya. It's important to consider how you will maintain the space and/or tools. So one idea is to create a routine maintenance schedule with cleaning procedures to regularly clean the sensory tools and the spaces, and the organization of items, like placing all fidgets at a centralized location for individuals to access, use, and return, and regularly sanitizing and testing tools, such as charging and testing the batteries for the items. Now that we've discussed some ideas for incorporating sensory inclusion with the concept of universal design, let's highlight some of the best practices implemented across the great state of Ohio. In Southwest Ohio, the Cincinnati Zoo has sensory maps, which highlight areas with loud noise, strong smells, low light, interactive spots, sensory bags, calming spaces, and even a sensory-friendly restroom. Plus, their Zoo Access for All webpage also includes social narrative activities like giraffe feeding and more. Heading over to the northwest region of the state, Souter Village in Archbold, Ohio, provides sensory kits that include noise-canceling headphones, fidgets, and a communication board. There's also a take a break space for visitors to relax. Their website hosts a social narrative, My Trip to Souter Village, which has pictures and descriptions to help you plan your visit. Lastly, we have the Ohio State Fair. Their social narrative has photographs with a narrative to accompany each and includes tips about comfortable clothing and shoes, expected wait times for various attractions, following the rules, the importance of always staying with family and friends during the visit, and a space to create a schedule for breaks and activities. The Ohio State Fair also hosts a sensory-friendly morning with dim lights, lower noise volumes, no flashing lights, and smaller crowds, making it a welcoming environment for everyone.
Cynthia, now that we've talked about sensory areas, tools, maps, and social narratives, let's discuss general considerations like ideas for group gatherings and meetings and creating a sensory-friendly facility. When organizations gather for groups and meetings, consider how sensory needs may be impacted. Here's some tips. For lighting, consider adjusting the brightness in spaces to suit different preferences. Create areas with dim lighting by turning off some overhead lights. Offer tinted glasses to help those sensitive to bright lights. Here's some ideas to consider for noise level. Ask everyone to take turns when speaking to reduce noise. Incorporate breaks into the event or the meeting. Provide noise-canceling headphones, and present information auditorily and visually. During meetings at work, provide employees with multiple ways to receive information, such as attending in person or remotely, and provide video recordings or transcription notes for later review. Provide an agenda beforehand so everyone knows to expect, similar to a social narrative. When creating social activities, offer options so individuals can choose the social setting that works best for them. And this applies to team building activities at work and community events. These practices benefit everyone, including those with sensory sensitivities, and align with the concept of universal design. Our next general consideration is about the physical built environment. When creating or renovating buildings, consider incorporating sensory-friendly aspects to make the environment more inclusive. In addition to sensory spaces and tools, there are several strategies to make your facility more sensory-friendly. One strategy is to use materials that reduce sound. For example, use wood flooring or low-profile carpet. Another example is sound-absorbing panels. These can be used freestanding like a room divider or mounted on walls. Lastly, consider placing noisy items like printers away from areas where people spend most of their time. Now, the colors and decor of your space can be impactful too. Reduce visual overload by offering spaces with decreased clutter. Neutral tones and simple decor create a calming environment. Be mindful that decor items such as candles, oil diffusers, and wax warmers can be calming for some, but distracting for others. Tools like air purifiers can help reduce smells or other potential allergens within the environment. Now, restrooms often have loud or unexpected sounds. So here's some ideas to make these spaces sensory friendly. Use signage to inform individuals about automatic features so they can prepare for the unexpected noise. Consider using manual options instead of automatic features to minimize sounds, such as using paper towels and manual soap dispensers. Now, our final consideration to share today is about training. Once you've implemented sensory inclusive practices, it's beneficial to train your staff on disability etiquette and awareness and about the accessibility features you offer. Here's why and how. Training on disability etiquette and awareness promotes a positive understanding of disability and helps remove fears, misconceptions, and biases. It equips staff with the knowledge to interact confidentially and respectfully with individuals with disabilities, including information about accessibility features such as sensory spaces and tools, events and hours, and social narratives into the training can be effective. This helps employees feel more confident when interacting with colleagues and guests and visitors with disabilities, promoting a more inclusive environment. OOD offers several training options like disability etiquette and awareness, which is tailored for either the workplace or community environments. Cynthia, would you like to share more about the services OOD offers?
Sure. The Accessible Ohio program partners with businesses, communities, venues, attractions, and employers to connect them with resources and information to support their accessibility journey. Here's how we can support you. We offer consultations, provide educational resources, and create resources aimed at helping our partners identify their accessibility goals and plan a way to achieve them. Our services connect partners to valuable resources along with direct links to tailored guidance. We also share ideas for solutions that align with accessible and universal design principles. And the best part is our services are completely free. If you're interested in partnering with us or have any questions, please visit the team page on our website for contact information. A link is being provided in the chat. For employers looking to diversify and strengthen their workforce by including people with disabilities, our business relations team provides a range of no-cost services and resources, including candidate sourcing to help employers find qualified candidates, hiring events to connect employers with potential employees, and disability etiquette and awareness training to promote an inclusive workplace. A link to the business relations team's contact information is on the business relations webpage, and a link is also being dropped into the chat.
Thanks, Cynthia. As we're nearing the end of this webinar, I think now is a good time to stop for our last question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A button at the top of your screen. Julie Wood is going to rejoin us to address the questions we've received. Welcome back, Julie.
Thank you, Tanya and Cynthia. We have lots of great questions that are coming in. Answer as many as we can and know that we are available to you after if we can't answer them as thoroughly as we'd like to. Tanya and Cynthia, if you have anything to add to these as I begin to answer, just wave or interrupt me and let me know. There's some similarity too to the questions that we're receiving. So there's one question asking about shared office space. And is there a way to make shared office space more accessible for all sorts of sensory sensitivities? And so what I think is being asked is if maybe this is a hybrid environment where one day a week, this is my workspace, and another day during the week, it's somebody else's. And so how can we make that same space accessible for everybody from a sensory perspective? So we've talked a lot in the webinar about flexibility and adjustability, and that would be key here as well. So when you think about the lighting and the temperature in that shared space, how can we make it adjustable? And then what can we add to the environment? So adding shades and curtains for natural lighting, providing flexible seating options, maybe sit-stand workstations, permitting the temperature to be adjusted, or provide a fan or a blanket, or permit these to be used if somebody is bringing these in. So those are some ideas, and I would say just the key is to think about, what can you provide for everyone that would be adjustable, and then what are things that you can add to the space. The next question is asking about visual sensitivity to patterns. Would it be a reasonable accommodation to request a space with a pattern being changed due to it making somebody dizzy or giving them headaches or causing nausea? So a person with a disability can make a request in the workplace through Title I or to, through the other titles to places where we go and visit in the community to talk about a barrier that they are experiencing and then work collaboratively, for example, with their employer to identify what would be an effective solution. So certainly if this is a barrier that a person is experiencing in the workplace, they could request an accommodation and then with the employer talk through what is the reasonable accommodation that would be effective in removing that barrier. And so that is what I would say to that. Whatever a person wants to request can be an accommodation. It's more of a matter of going through that interactive process to collaborate with the individual to find out what can be implemented that is reasonable and effective. The next question is asking, how can you identify what is bothering a person to know what sensory need they may have that you can help with? And asking really to break down what are the common signs in each of these sensory areas. And so from a general perspective, just know that some people need more sensory input and some people need less. So when we think about sights and sounds and temperatures and touch, some people need more stimulus and some people need less, but people know what they need. So when a person requests, lets you know that there's a barrier and makes a request, that person will know what their sensory needs are. What you want to engage in that process is identifying what is the barrier and how can we remove that and create an accessible environment through an effective, reasonable accommodation, many of which we have discussed today, some ideas for those possibilities. The next question is asking, is requesting a different virtual platform considered a reasonable accommodation? And so similarly, the request can be made, and then you would want to, as the employer, talk about what is the barrier to the virtual platform, and then what is the effective solution. Maybe it is looking at the current virtual platform that you have to see, can we enable a feature that makes it more accessible? Can we deactivate a feature to make it more accessible, or can we augment it in some way? There might be solutions other than changing the virtual platform, but certainly that request can be made and considered during the process. Tanya, I see that you're unmuted. Did you want to add to something that we're talking through with these questions?
Nope, I'm good. You're doing great, Julie.
Okay, I just didn't want to miss out on that. Our next question is asking, can you offer resources to bring a mobile sensory unit on site for an event? So we certainly, through our consultative services that the Accessible Ohio specialists provide to their partners, can discuss this goal and can do the research to collect information on how you could create a mobile sensory unit, or find out who provides this service in your area and include that information back to you. Just know that we don't endorse products and services, but we certainly can identify who might be able to provide that service for your on-site event. The next question is asking if OOD consults with community organizations such as places of worship as they seek to enhance their sensory inclusive practices. And yes, we can consult with businesses, communities, venues, attractions, employers about their accessibility goals. So certainly would be happy to connect with you. You can find our contact information on the AO webpage. We have a tab for the team contact information. You don't need to worry about which region you fall into. We would be happy to connect you with the Accessible Ohio specialist in your region, but happy to talk with you further about your goals. We received a question asking, are there any sensory inclusion areas or events in the Northeast region of Ohio? And there are organizations across the entire state that do consider sensory inclusion at their venues and events. We highlighted a few in today's webinar. Specifically in that region, we have consulted with festivals and different types of venues about their sensory spaces. So would be happy to connect with you about those types of resources available to you, or about your venue if you are looking to make it sensory accessible. We have a question that's asking about attending activities with or coordinating activities with adults with developmental disabilities and utilizing sensory rooms at venues like a ball game, and said that while it's helpful, attending that space or visiting that space takes them away from the event or the activity that they are there to enjoy, and so feels that these spaces are beneficial if you did not bring with you to the event what you need to manage your sensory needs and want to take a break to visit the space, or for maybe emergency needs, but asking, are there other practical reasons for having these available in the community? So a sensory room or a space is a place that a person might want to take a break from the activity, the lights or the sounds or the crowds, to manage their sensory needs and then to resume their activities at that venue. So they're there for those who wish to use them, but you're right, if you step away to use the sensory room, then you might miss an inning of the game. And so that's where those additional sensory tools that we can take with us while we're enjoying the experience could be considered for their benefit. So thinking about tinted lenses, noise canceling earbuds, the fidget tools that we can use. So certainly a way to take a look at how can we manage sensory needs in the moment, but also if we want to take a break to these spaces to manage our sensory needs. So thank you for that question. We did receive a comment in the Q&A that wasn't a question, but somebody was saying that they would love these questions in writing. That came in fairly early, so I'm not sure if that person was referring to the poll questions that we were asking, but know that we will be providing the webinar on demand in our library soon. So the entire webinar will be available. And if you want to connect with us afterwards, if there was something specific to that question that we could help connect you with, we would be happy to. And I believe that is it for the questions. So I will turn it back to Cynthia and Tanya to conclude, but thank you all. These were great. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Julie, and thanks to our audience for joining us today. So we're going to give a quick recap on what we discussed. Today we introduced and defined sensory inclusion. We discussed various ways to accommodate sensory needs in both the workplace and in community spaces. We explored universal design concepts to create your own sensory inclusive spaces in your work and community environments. And we were able to share a few Ohio venues that have implemented sensory spaces, tools, maps, and social narratives.